So I first want to begin by welcoming you and thanking you for being so generous with your time here today and allowing us to kind of pick your brain and when it comes to relationships and masculinity from a male point of view. So I'd like to start by asking you, Noah, how did you get into this work? Tell us a little bit about yourself.
Well, originally I came from Canada. I'm living now in Portugal, but years ago, often my friends would come to me for advice. And of course, being a kid, I didn't know anything about anything. And unlike most people, I would just tell them I don't know. I would go and research it. I would look in psychology books. I would look in books from various religions and gurus and all of these things and try to come up with what made sense. As much as possible, I'd actually look to scientific solutions as sources for things. So what had been proven to work, as well as what was proven to work historically. And what happened is my friends started coming to me more and more for advice. If you give good advice to someone, they will tell their friends, oh, Noah can probably help you with that. And so it just built up. And I was doing this for helping a lot of friends. And I started doing business coaching as well, because my first business I started at the age of 15. And within a year, I had over 50 employees, and it was running quite well. I then got rid of that business so that I could finish my high school. And I started doing a lot of business coaching. And every time I tried to do business coaching, the real problems that people had were not their business. It was their personal life. And because their personal life wasn't well sorted, that would cause their business to lack attention that they needed to give to it. It would become unsorted as well. And then over time, that would cause their business to decay. So I ended up doing more personal coaching than business coaching. Now, about 2 or 3 years ago, I was listening to a video by Stefan Molyneux, and he said that you need to, if you can, you need to do what you can to make the world a better place. For some people, that's just one-on-one interactions. For other people, it means doing something where you can interact with many people at once. And I thought about that, and it really pricked my conscience and made me ask myself, am I doing the most that I can do to make the world a better place? And I realized that the coaching I was giving people was changing their lives and was very valuable for them. And I started to think, how can I do this more? Well, the only way I could do it more and make it sustainable was to turn it into an actual business. And since then, I've been collecting coaching clients and also writing a blog where I share a lot of basic information that people need to know and exercises for my clients and things that we do in sessions with them. And the blog, to a certain extent, helps me to think clearly. Writing is a great way to concretize your thoughts and make them more clear. And when I write something down, I can then show it to many people at once, get feedback, and not just make sure it's a good idea, but make sure it can actually be applied by my clients.
Wow, quite a story. So, so now you've been doing relationship coaching for a number of years. And so I'm going to ask you an unconventional question first. So how has this impacted your own marriage? Tell us a little bit about your marriage and your children and your family life.
So I've been married for almost 17 years, and I married to a Portuguese woman. And so when we first got married, of course, most young Portuguese people speak English as well. And this wasn't much of a problem then. We were able to easily communicate. But what it did is when you give other people advice, you have to be doubly sure that you apply that advice in your own life. You tell someone that you must deal reasonably with your spouse. You must take care of your appearance. Even if you're a man, you need to take somewhat care of your appearance. You must take care of your health. You must maintain frame with women so that they feel confident in you. Well, if you're telling other people to do that, you must set the example. And so it reinforced my need to set the example and to take personal responsibility for how I acted. And that's really improved my marriage quite a bit. As I become more successful at coaching, I can see also my wife, her stress level reduces because she sees I'm in a job where I'm really happy, where I'm not just successful, but I'm really fulfilled. And that gives her a sense of satisfaction, not feeling or worrying that I am happy in what I'm doing. And so it's really worked out quite well. I also have a 5-year-old son. A few days ago, he says to me, "It seems like finding a wife is a lot of hard work, he said. So he says, Dad, when I get older, will you help me with that? I said, of course, son. That's what I'm here for. I'm your father. In fact, that's the reason most people come to me, is their father didn't give them the advice they needed. And so I'm absolutely dedicated to ensuring that my son has good advice about relationships, friendships, as well as romantic relationships when he gets older, so that he can avoid the mistakes that so many people today make simply because they don't know.
Exactly. Wow, that's so funny that he's picking up on this, probably because of your home culture, and he hears all this at 5 years old. I think that's so cute. So
Well, he's naturally interested because he's a very masculine young man. So he's naturally interested in family structure and children. And though often people think that masculinity doesn't include, for example, the interest in children and the care of children. But the word husbandry, which is looking after animals, comes from the word husband. What it means is to take care of. So the reality is masculinity is very much wrapped up, especially if you are at the top of your hierarchy, so to speak, in your community. Your job is to take care of other people. And that's a big part of what actually is in complete masculinity, is care for people who are in your in-group.
I love that. And I think that's such a good segue into the next question, and which I'll make it into a double part question. And so the first part is, I would love to hear your thoughts on what you think is healthy masculinity. And and the second part question would be, taking that then, what is the role of the masculine in a marriage and a relationship?
That's an excellent question. We hear a lot about toxic masculinity, and the reality is what is described, sometimes they describe it as that way in order to denigrate natural masculine characteristics. But very often when there's a talk of toxic masculinity, it's describing non-masculine characteristics. So there's a couple of ways that we can describe masculinity. There is the way of the virtues of masculinity, which is strength. So that's not just physical strength. Of course, men should strive to be healthy and fit. Everyone should. But men must have emotional strength. They must be the bedrock, not just of their family, but of their community. It's important for men to be able to maintain frame under situations of stress and situations of difficulty. Men must be mentally strong as well, which means learning what is necessary to accomplish whatever tasks they come across in their life. Stoic thought talks about accepting the things that you cannot control and maintaining control of the things that you can. So taking personal responsibility is part of that strength. It takes a strong man to take responsibility for himself and his actions. And we have strength, we have courage as well. Now, a lot of people will think courage immediately, again, physical. They'll think of physical courage, the courage to face a danger. But it's more than just that. It's also emotional courage and intellectual courage, the courage to speak the truth, even when it's difficult, and to stand up to untruth and to lies in our community, even when we risk ostracization and problems because of it. And this especially is very rare in modern times. And we have also a mastery, which is the ability to be professional at the things we do and master whatever our craft or our trade is. Throughout human history, men who are masters of their craft have always been appreciated. In my case, my craft is coaching people. So I spend a lot of time, almost as much time learning as I do actually coaching, to be the master of what I'm doing. And finally, the last one is honor. What honor is the mutual respect that you get amongst your peer group, amongst your in-group. And this is very important for men. In fact, men without honor were typically driven out of society. Men who would not keep their word, who were not honest, who could not be relied upon, and who would leave, if you think far enough back, who might leave their brothers during a hunt and someone could end up getting killed or maimed. And so that ability to have honor, the ability to know that my brother will stand beside me, to know that my friend is going to be there when I need him, and that he has that same trust and honor for me is a very big part of masculinity, the brotherhood of men. And I think these four things, these were talked about by in the book, The Way of Men. It's absolutely something that I suggest all men read, and women who want to understand men better can also read it. And then we have the utility side of it. So men are usually responsible for two things in society: protection and providing. We're the ones that guard the gates, that build the walls around society, and ensure that women and children have a safe place to operate. We keep out dangerous animals and dangerous men. And that's a big part of what it means to be a man. And that's not necessarily, in our modern times, literally standing on a wall with a gun. What it might mean is simply making wise decisions about how we train our children and how we set up our household so as to keep them safe, keeping bad association away from our children, for example. And the providing is quite clear. It means that we are responsible for ensuring that our wife and children have the resources they need, not necessarily giving it to every whim, but the things they need to be happy and healthy and fulfilled. And if we look within this sphere, there's no room for toxicity in there. There often, when people say, for example, if you're a man and you're angry, they'll say it's toxic masculinity. But the reality is anger can be a very protective emotion for men. And they can be angry over injustices, which means it's because it's touching their sense of honor and duty. They can be angry at threats to their loved ones or to their other brothers of their tribe. And this can create a sense of anger that is just and righteous and helps motivate people to action. So a lot of what's called toxic masculinity is actually an attempt to weaken men so that they are more easily controlled, because men who are fully actuated, who are fully masculine, are free men. They are difficult for tyrants and others to control. And this makes them very powerful, and it makes them dangerous to those who would take away our freedoms.
So beautifully said. I love it. And for those of you guys that are listening, if this doesn't show you the burden and the integrity and the honor that a man carries on their shoulders every single day, thank you so much. I mean, I think that was so beautifully said. And understanding, we talked about femininity last week. So I guess my next question is, how can a woman that wants to honor this in her man, because I work with women that say, my man has become completely passive. He watches TV. He sits on the couch. He's lost his zest for life. How can I get him to be more masculine? What can a feminine woman do that wants to inspire this in her man?
This is a little bit cultural, but a lot of it is because it tends to affect men from certain cultures worse. But men have a need for heroicism. It's built right into our DNA. It's part of that honor. There used to be, in all societies, there was some sort of a ceremony with a challenge, sometimes many life-threatening challenges for men to earn the right, or for boys to earn the right to be called men. Nowadays, you're a man when you hit 18. Oh, now you're a man. And there's no obvious changeover from here upon your shoulders is the burdens of manhood. And you are now capable of doing it. You've passed these tests, and therefore you know in your heart that you can do what it takes to be a man. We don't have anything like that anymore. And so a lot of men, especially younger men, they have no great challenges to test them. They don't have to go hunt a woolly mammoth. They don't have to fight the neighboring tribe that wants to take over their tribe. There's nothing heroic they can do. They have no option or opportunity to prove that they are men. And on top of that, very often when they exercise the early stages as young men, very, very young men, and they're even children, the early stages of that territorial protective nature, they get in trouble. Boys getting in fights is natural. That's what happens. Now, of course, they have to learn how to not just get along, but how to spar with each other in a way that nobody gets seriously injured. But if you're in school and you're a boy, you're expected to behave very much like a girl. You got to sit down. You've got to be very calm. You have to be very submissive and very quiet, and do what almost always a female teacher tells you to do all day long. And it crushes down their ability to be men. The foundation for manhood is laid in childhood. My son already, he says, every time when I go to bed at night, I think about how I would defeat monsters. He told me that last night. How could I defeat monsters? And he says, I could trap them, and I could do this, and I could do that, and I could get my friends together, and we could fight the monsters. This is how boys, free of any pressure to make them embarrassed for their masculinity, this is how they think. They want to protect society. They want to protect their mothers and their brothers and others who are weaker than them from danger. And men don't get any of this. So what do? They spend all day long playing video games where they're a hero, reading comic books where they're a hero, watching movies about superheroes because they want some hero to emulate. And they don't have any of that. And so they're completely demotivated because there's no great adventure for them to go on. And what women can do is, first of all, they can encourage masculinity in men. They can tell men how much they appreciate it. When your son shows protective characteristics of his mother to protect his mother, instead of saying, no, you don't know, that's not your responsibility. No, you say, oh, I thank you so much for your desire to keep me safe. When it's older men, when you get talking about men in their 20s, and every time they show a desire to be protective, to be to provide, to take leadership roles, encourage that in them. Let them know they have the potential to be much more than they are. And not in a critical way, but in a way that you would love to see them achieve and be fully actuated in their masculinity. And a lot of young men, they've gotten kind of pessimistic about the reality of how women feel about men. And so it might take a while for them to start adopting changes into their life from this. Part of it is that there needs to be there needs to be an acknowledgement, especially to younger men, that there has been a failure on the part of many of the women who have raised them. Children are raised mostly by women. And a lot of children are raised by single mothers. And then on top of that, they go to school where there's only female teachers. And until they're in maybe high school, they get a male teacher, or college, they have no time to be around men, to absorb masculinity, to see what it's like to be a man. And all they have is overly dramatic TV representations of masculinity. And this leads them to be very confused about masculinity. Oftentimes, there's a lot of criticism amongst women of men. That's one of the best ways that women can encourage masculinity, is stop criticizing men, especially in general. You can say, so-and-so was dishonest and I don't like that. Okay, that's fine. But just saying all men are trash, that's just as bad as a man telling his son that all women are trash. It's, first of all, it's a lie. And second of all, it says to the boy himself that you also will grow up to be trash. And therefore, there's no point in being motivated because you'll just be worse. So there's a lot women can do to encourage masculinity.
Yes, this is so, there's so much in there, ladies. I'm going to let you guys kind of sink in, and I'll speak to, I want to respond to this, but meanwhile, I want to let the new people that are coming in know that if you have any questions for Noah, he's been very generous with his time. So please go ahead and leave your questions in the chat box. You can open up the chat, type it in there, and we'll take it. So many good points in there. I teach some of this in my Babes Club membership that I have, where they have 4 calls with me monthly. And one of the things we were talking about, how this need for this need for, like you said, heroism. There's been studies done on like 1-year-olds that don't know what the word hero means or the word appreciate means. But if you appreciate them for being a hero, they respond in a very positive manner, yet they don't understand what this word means. It's almost like an energetic exchange. They know what it means when they're doing something honorable, something that makes them feel, and that's why they're so obsessed with being superheroes since they're babies. And one of the things that we can now do in our relationships with all, like you said, with our children, brothers, fathers, colleagues, neighbors, husbands, is that is highlight the everyday things that they do that are very heroic. It doesn't have to be that you jump out in the middle of the street and save a little old lady or a child. How many opportunities do men get for those sorts of things? But there's everyday sacrifices that men make every single day. I had something happen earlier this year where I was at Target with my daughter and we were coming out and it was pouring rain. When I had gone in, it was sunny. We live in Houston. Come out, it's pouring rain. And there was a man, a construction worker, fixing the door at Target. And he saw me standing there looking at my car, but, being hesitant to go out. And he offered himself getting completely drenched in the rain to carry my daughter to the car so that my daughter and I wouldn't get wet. He ran us there so fast, got her in the car, buckled her in, and the second that I turned around to offer him to give him a ride back, he was gone. He didn't even let me thank him. There was no there was nothing that he was expecting in return for that. And I kept thinking, he got drenched. He probably has a full days of work left. And that was it. I mean, this is everyday heroes. And he didn't know me. He didn't know my child. And these things exist all around us. And when you're not receptive to it, when you're not open to it, another woman would have been saying, oh, that's creepy. Why would you let a man, carry your, we're so afraid of this simple acts of kindness and men being men.
Well, it's interesting you mentioned being open to it, and you specifically cultivate femininity, and that inspires masculinity to a large extent. And if it had been a woman who was dressed like she just got back from the gym and was all frumpy looking, he might have thought, well, what is she signaling? She's signaling, no, thank you, I don't need no man's help. And you are signaling, I am a feminine woman open to masculine protection. And that makes it much easier for men to do that. Women sometimes have problems with self-confidence. So do men, especially younger men. And very often, the more approachable that a woman can make herself, and that's femininity. Being more feminine makes you more approachable. It's easier then for people to approach you because you're essentially signaling to the world that I am open for this kind of help. I am open for this communication. One of my clients said, she says, now that I have become open to masculinity, she says, my cup runneth over. My life is filled up with masculine men appearing in it. Because she says, how do I find masculine men? And I said, be feminine, they'll find you. And this was amazing to her how all of a sudden masculine men were coming out to help her, to take her on dates, to be around her, because she had switched off from thinking in hunting mode. She had been hunting from mate to thinking in, I will be open to what I receive. And this is a huge change for her. And I think for a lot of women have gone through very similar changes. When they were looking, they couldn't find. And when they were open to receiving, they then found what they were looking for.
So beautifully said, Noah. Oh my God. Yes. It's ladies, it's this energetic exchange that we talk about, right? It's like you turn your feminine light on and they're just attracted towards you. And it's not all just romantic. I mean, I can't go anywhere. I mean, we're talking Dollar Tree, Target. These are the kind of places that I go, right? The grocery store. Without people coming up to me, men, especially at the mall, offering to, can I do this for you? Can I do this for you? Opening doors. I was just sharing a story the other day. We went to the Dollar Tree and an older gentleman came up and he said, hi, are you from around here? And he's having this 20-minute conversation about his children and his grandchildren. And he said, I'm so sorry for taking your time. Something just compelled me to come and speak to you. And that's that feminine energy. And I knew what he was talking about because that happens to me all the time. Now, the old Mina, no, never. I mean, this was the Mina the men were competing with, and I couldn't understand. So it's really this energetic exchange. And once it clicks for women, it's life changing.
I think it's very important that you mentioned too, it's not sexual. There's an automatic thinking that femininity equals sexuality. But a little girl can be feminine and there's no sexuality involved there. An old lady can be very feminine as well. What it is, doesn't have to do with sex. It has to do with appreciation for gender roles. You know, I appreciate being around masculine men. It makes me a better man. There's nothing sexual there. What it is appreciation for certain qualities that that person has, for very often the fact that they are truly at home in themselves. They're truly comfortable in their own body. And they're comfortable in their own body because they've made it into being what they want it to be. And this is, I mean, that's different than the fat, the fat positivity movement is. This is different. You're happy with your body because it's what you want it to be. And you're happy with your personality because it's the personality you want. You're happy with your role in life because it's the role you've created for yourself. And I think that makes people very attractive in a sense of attracting good things and good people into their life. You know, I often will meet men and they'll say, "Oh, there's no good women left." And I'll say to them, it's strange you say that because I don't know any not good women. You know, every woman I meet seems wonderful. Not because I have very high expectations, but I behave in such a way so as to attract those kind of people into my life, men and women. I don't attract bad men either. I attract good people into my life because of the way that I behave and the way that I act and the messages that I send out. And so very often helping people, helping women to find a good man or a man to find a good woman is helping them to start attracting the right kind of people in general. You know, for men, I say, first go out and make some male friends. If you don't have any male friends, how on earth are you going to communicate with a woman if you can't even communicate with another man? You know, first you figure that out, and then you can figure out how to get a girlfriend, because you learn then how to attract the right kind of people, and then it's just shifting that over to how to attract the right kind of woman. And it's just fundamental life. And I can see, yes, there are lots of unactualized people out there, people who they're broken or in a state of disrepair, and they're not people I would want in my life. Yeah, I want to help them, but I can't be close friends with them.
Right.
It's like tends to attract like. Very often, for example, for women, you can, if you meet a man and you're wondering what kind of a man he is, ask him what he thinks of women. If he thinks that women are all terrible, that means only terrible women so far have spent time with him or will spend time with him. That probably means that he's not a very good quality man either, because either he shouldn't tolerate such women in his life, or he wouldn't be attracting them in the first place if he was a better man.
Oh my God. Yes, yes, and yes. So beautifully said. Yes, this is it, ladies. This is it. And you can reverse that and say the same. The women that are going around saying there's no good men out there, same applies to the same way. Oh, love that. So it seems like we're getting some comments, and let's see what people are saying. So Maggie said, wow, what a great description of healthy masculinity. And Lisa said, thank you for the explanation for the movies and games. What an aha moment. Yes, yes. Another comment is, I just got this on another level. Being open and receptive will move the masculine towards me. Yes. Thank you, Mina and Noah. This has been so enlightening. Yes, thank you so much, guys. And if you have any questions, you can, we'll hang out for another minute. But while we're doing that, Noah, would you please let us know where we can find you and where we can get your articles and more from you?
So the best way to keep in touch with me is to look on smv4k.com. So that's sexual market value for K-selected people. If you look on the site, you can find out what that is. Just search for case-selected, find out what I mean by that. And one thing that I noticed when I first started giving coaching advice is that most of the advice for men was from the perspective of pickup artistry. And it was basically, how can you take as much as possible from women? And I found that rather disgusting, to say the least. And so when I started SMV4K, it was to create a different type of dating advice. It was about finding love and finding a permanent romantic partner, someone to live the rest of your life with. And that's where the case selected comes in. You can see if you read some of the articles there, because the goal is really to pair bond and have children. A big part of the reason why I started specifically coaching in this area is that I have a son. Hopefully I'll have another child by this time next year. And I want my child to grow up in a world full of people who were raised in happy, loving families, because that makes a huge difference in the kind of culture and society he grows up in. Societies with strong families are strong societies. They tend to be freer. They tend to be more wealthy. They tend to be happier. And that's largely simply from parents making good decisions when they get married. Almost all divorces, the seeds for divorce are laid in the dating stage. If people do it right from the beginning, the chance of divorce is very small. People tell me all the time, especially men that are MGTOW, they'll say, yeah, I got a 50% chance of getting divorced. And I mean, who wants to take that kind of risk? It's like flipping a coin. And I say to them, no, you at the moment have 100% chance of getting divorced if you get married because you have the wrong attitude. Me, I have 0% chance of getting divorced because neither my wife or I will get divorced. We just simply won't do it. It's not going to happen. And between the two of us, there's a 50% chance of divorce on the average. That's how these averages come about. It doesn't say anything about your specific situation. Each individual there are some risks. For example, I married someone that comes from a different language background. That increases my risk of divorce. On the other hand, we both came from the same religious background, so that increases the chance of success. And between these intrinsic factors, we also had our personal choices and our personal views on marriage. And I remember in the very early stages, I said to her, how do you feel about divorce? And she says, I don't want to get married if I think that's a possibility. And she said, I see how she put that. Yeah, it's success or die, basically. She said, we're either going to make it or we're going to die,
That's what my husband says too.
And it has to be that strict. And if everyone went into marriage thinking this is for life or else, they would make a much better decision. They would be much more thoughtful in how they make the decision. Many people put more thought into picking a new car than they do into picking a spouse. It's ridiculous. You have the car for 5 or 10 years. You have the spouse forever. And worse than that, you can get rid of the car anytime you want. You can't get rid of your spouse. And once you have children, not only do you have to raise your children with your spouse, your children are half your spouse. So if you pick poorly, you can end up with children with serious problems because you picked a poor mate, And I think a lot of this attitude towards dating and marriage came from my great grandparents. They used to talk to me about, they lived in they had been Volga Germans. So that means Germans who lived along the Volga River in Russia, and they had immigrated long, long ago to Canada. And they lived in a community in a very isolated area. And these communities are essentially a government unto themselves. Nobody really bothers them very much. And until recently, they didn't even collect, until the post-Second World War, they didn't even pay taxes because they were living in no tax zones in Canada in the middle of nowhere. And they were very careful about who they allowed to marry into their tribe. And they would say, if you want to marry someone from outside the tribe, they'd give you lots of advice. They'd say to you, does this person work well with our family? And the family was maybe 70, 80 individuals, a couple of generations, extended family. And they'd say, if you pick someone good and we give you their blessing, we're going to help you. We're going to make sure you get a house right off the bat. And they would support them. And if not, well, you'll have to go and live somewhere else because we can't have you disturbing the peace and harmony of the family.
Mm.
And so this required everyone who wanted to get married to think very deeply about their choices. And in that, I mean, people didn't get divorced very often back then, but amongst them, they also had very happy marriages. There's
Mm.
a lot of happy marriages there because the whole family helped you make a good decision. The whole family helped you figure out if the person you were dating was being honest with you. This is a big problem nowadays. People date in a vacuum.
Yeah.
They meet somebody on, worst of all, Tinder. They
Oh
meet
my
somebody on
God.
Tinder or OkCupid, and it's fine to look for a date there if you want. The problem is then you meet that person. They meet none of your friends. You meet none of their friends. You go on 10 dates. You fall in love, and then you bring them to your family, and your family goes, "Oh my God, what are you doing?" Or
And it's
worse,
too
you have
late because you're invested by that time.
exactly. Or worse, you never bring them to your friends and family until you're married. I've heard of
Mm.
cases like that.
Me
Oh,
too.
oh, mom and dad, we got eloped on the phone, and then you're stuck. And usually, many people simply don't have families that they can trust. They're every time a client comes to me, I ask them this question early on, in usually the first session: why don't you go ask your father these questions? Why are you asking me, a stranger? Because honestly, I would prefer, if they had a good father, that they go ask their father these questions. And almost every single time, sometimes they just want a second opinion, or they want very specific advice their dad doesn't know about. But almost every time, they either don't have a father,
Mm.
or their father is not sufficiently involved in their life, or has not got the wisdom to give them advice, or is not protective enough, especially for women. Women really, they want feel protection from their father, who will protect them from potential bad matches. And they come to me to help them test their ideas about dating and make sure they're dating the right person. And if we as fathers, myself and other fathers, if we can make sure we're giving our children the proper support, and even crossways, if you have nieces and nephews, make sure that they know they can come to you about relationship information and advice at any time, and you'll support them. If families supported each other much more, we'd have a lot less divorces. It's very hard to get divorced when you marry essentially one family to the next rather than two individuals, because you have the whole support of both sides of the family to work things out. Most divorces are over, frankly, very silly things. They're, little power squabbles. Someone isn't fulfilling their responsibilities properly. Somebody left the toilet seat up too many times. These are the types of things people get divorced about. Often it's just a matter of not being humble enough to say sorry and work out the problems. But when you have a whole family behind you, now many people, they just don't have this as an option. They have to create a community behind them out of friends. But if you have a whole family or a whole community behind you saying that, no, divorce isn't good for you, it's not good for your children, don't do it, and supporting marriage, your chance of divorce drops dramatically. There are real consequences then to taking a frivolous divorce. If you're a man and you frivolously get divorced, you should lose honor amongst your other men. Your brothers should look down on you for that. First, they should counsel you not to do it, and then they should look down on you for it. If you're a woman and you give up easily your marriage, your sisters, your fellow women in your community should encourage you not to do that. They should encourage you, and I'm talking for frivolous reasons. They should encourage you to make up with your husband. This is good advice you give to your friends. Especially for men, I don't trust a man who cheats on his wife. I won't be friends with a man who even thinks that's a possibility. It's all the time I've done business, I've avoided even doing business with men who cheat on their wives. If they're going to cheat on their most important commitment that they've ever made, they'll cheat me too.
Yes, yes. This is so this it comes down to integrity and honor, like you said. I think so beautifully said, Noah. And luckily, I was born and raised in the U.S., but I come from a background culture where still marriage is a marriage of families, and that's what they say. My dad used to have this saying that he used to say that when people buy horses, they look 7 generations back. So how can you marry someone without knowing where they came from? And I used to think it was such a silly comparison growing up, but I get it now. So Noah, it seems like we're having some questions come in. And so one of the questions is, oh, that's a great one. So Fatima asks, what is the best way to show respect to a man? Oh, I love that one.
I think there's two things that can be done more that would be very good. One is saying thank you, showing gratitude. And I think you mentioned that earlier. And the other one is um, asking for men's advice about things, especially where the man is an expert on, and you may not know as much. Men want, this is part of the heroism thing. We want to help. We want to help, especially the women in our life. He will even help random women just because we enjoy helping women. But especially the women in our life, if they ask us for help, if they give the impression that our help is valuable to them by asking for it and then by appreciating it afterwards, this gives us a sense of fulfillment, a sense that we are really doing something important with our lives. And I think for a lot of men, this is missing. They don't have motivation because nobody's asking them for help. And when they do, they're asking them for help in a using way. The third way, actually, I said two, there's actually three, is to ensure that your relationship with men is reciprocal. So if they help you, is there something you can do to help them? You know, if you need a man to help you, who's a friend, let's say a friend that you need his help. You're a single woman and you need some help from a friend to fix your plumbing. And you have him come over, he fixes the plumbing, give him a sandwich, give him something to drink. Make that exchange with him, and then of course say thank you. This makes the man feel that it is a reciprocal relationship and he's not being used. And men are becoming very sensitive to women using them for resources and not being thankful. And to a lot of times, there's the thought that all reciprocation has to somehow be sex. There's this weird idea of that. It's not that. The most important thing that you can do to reciprocate to men is just being feminine and polite and nice to them and treating them with respect.
This is so true. And one of the things I teach women is that if your man is complaining, or any man, this doesn't have to be a romantic relationship in your life, and if it ever comes out, I did XYZ for you, that means you did not thank him at the time that he did XYZ for you. Because a man that is fully thanked, he'll even the score. In his mind, that thing that he did for you is equal just from your full-bodied appreciation. And this isn't a thank you. This is really a open, receptive, you thank with your eyes, with your smile, with your facial features, with your softness, with your body, with your energy. It's a full body experience. And for him, it's checked off. If you ever did get into an argument with that man, I promise you, he will never bring that thing up, because in his box, in his mind, you're even.
Yeah, we literally block it out. We literally don't. We can't recall it if we wanted to. And it's interesting what you mentioned, and you cannot fake that kind of thankfulness. Everything that we do, every signal we send, everything that comes externally starts internally.
Yes.
So if we want to have respect for men, and we want to demonstrate it, or for men, if we want to have respect for women, that must start first inside, at your own attitude. And even one step back from that is, a woman who's not respecting men probably doesn't respect herself either. And that's almost always the root of it. If she does not respect herself, and especially her femininity, either because she's trying to ignore her femininity or because she doesn't respect it as being strong and powerful as well, she will then feel a rivalry with men. And then she will treat them without respect. And if she can learn to respect herself, that's no longer a problem.